Okay, hey everyone, this is the instrument approach discussion. So just a quick overview. Today we're talking about a scenario when you're with your TPE on your check ride, and a question comes up about MDA versus DA, and can you execute a DA when you're flying a localizer only approach? So we'll talk about the differences between the MDA and the DA, the risks associated, some ADM considerations, and then legal safety implications, and tie up with the biblical integration. So, what are the differences between the MDA and the DA? So, both are used on approaches to establish vertical guidance and vertical guidance through IMC conditions, and both are minimums for the different types of approach. So, the decision altitude is when you are flying on glide path and the aircraft descends continuously all the way to your decision altitude. And at that point, if you can't establish visual contact with the field, you go ahead and execute the missed approach. So it's a continuous descent to your DA and used on precision approaches like the ILS or LPV. The minimum descent altitude, or the MDA, is used on non-precision approaches, and the aircraft will descend to and level off at a prescribed MDA and maintain that MDA until you can establish visual reference to the field. It's a little bit different than your decision altitude. And once you've established a pre-identified missed approach point, again, you're at your MDA at this point, and if you still cannot establish visual contact with the field, you execute the missed approach procedure, and this is used on your, again, like non-precision approaches to the VUR or your localizer only or LNAV. So what's the issue with treating an MDA like a DA? So if a pilot continues past the MDA on a non-precision approach, you're setting yourself up for higher risk for unseen terrain or obstacles and impact to the aircraft. So non-precision approach, you don't have a glide path reference. You're flying localizer only. There's increased risk for obstacles for impacting the ground. FAR 91.17 dictates that pilots may not descend below published minimums unless required flight visibility exists. The runway environment is visible, and the aircraft can execute a normal landing. So, what does that mean? Typically, 3-degree glide slope right to the field, and not executing, a 10-degree glide slope or some extreme descent in order to land the aircraft. So, these rules exist for a reason. It's important to remember why these minimums are different and the types of approach that you're using, whether or not precision or non-precision. And the runway environment, or the field environment here, is something to consider as well. So obviously your ceiling and visibility dictate, when you can see the field, your visibility, and as you're breaking through on glide path or at your MDA. The different altitudes where you can actually establish visual contact, and good ADM here is to fly the published routes and adhere to those minimums and avoid tendencies to get home as quickly as possible, right? And just thinking that you can drop 50 feet below the MDA, or continuing, let's say you're on an MDA at 500 feet and you think you can continue below down to 200 feet, that's when you set yourself up for very high risk tendency here. So a lot of CFIT, or controlled flight and terrain incidents, happen because pilots are flying below minimums. And when you're flying an ILS, you need to ensure that the aircraft is equipped with the specific equipment on board. So if that's ILS system or a localizer only, or VUR, or RNAV, GPS, you need to ensure that you're flying the type of approach that your aircraft is equipped for, and then adhering to the respective minimums there. So biblical integration, as well as references here, but biblical integration here. So I like this quote here. So give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. I think, I think this is a really good parallel to what you're focusing here in this phase of the course. So I think discipline is a requirement. So being steadfast, discipline is really a requirement for instrument flight. Not a suggestion, but truly a requirement here. So avoid the external pressures, avoid the get home-itis, and rely on sound aeronautical decision making for guidance when you're executing your approach procedures. Respect the DA and the MDA as it applies to your procedure, and allow yourself and your passengers to walk home safely and live to fly another day. So I think that's really how this ties in. I think it's really important to keep that at the forefront of what we're doing here, as you're training yourself to go in time sea conditions. Okay, thank you.